This is actually a little vignette. It was published in the Collector's Guide a number of years ago. And I'm not going to read the academic part of it, just the narrative story. And I said it about 150 years ago at Santa Clara, Pueblo, when my grandmother would have been a young girl. And she had two sisters, and it's sort of just a slice of their experience harvesting corn. And I also have two sisters, so to kind of transfer the narrative it worked. But it's still like my satya there, and it's just very emotional. So the Tewa words are a few Tewa words. Jia, which means mother, Ta, which means uncle, and Avanyu, which means water serpent. So here we go. And like I said, just bear with me at the emotional moments. Emotional is good. Oh, thank you. Okay. We awoke as the first colors of the day danced themselves across the smooth mud walls of our house and traveled toward the cornfields at the west end of the village, Hapa-Owinga village where roses grow near Singing Water. Under our soft woven blankets, insulated from the cool fall air that had crept in mountain lion-like as we slept, we pulled ourselves from our dreams and waited for the sun. Taking turns with a small spiny brush made from dry yucca leaves, we smoothed and twisted each other's hair into little butterfly shapes and tied them into place with thin strips of smoked elk hide. We dressed ourselves in the thick wool mantas and wide-woven belts made for us by Jia, and helped each other with our tall white moccasins, whose black soles curved upward at the tip. The butterfly shapes were the color of storm clouds at night. We made our sakewe from corn that we ground into fine meal and water from a small spring near the river. We ate sakewe every morning. We also used the cornmeal for our morning prayers. The fields were many steps from our home, and we walked slowly in their direction. Above us, white geese. To the north, thick clouds and mountains. All around us, moist air and light. Stepping into the dampness of the bright green rose, moving toward the center of the sunlit maze, we brushed against the dry corn blooms that poured from their stalks and made low rustling sounds when birds or wind moved near them. And when birds or wind moved near them and the dry corn blooms made no low rustling sounds, we knew the corn was ready to harvest. Gently, we plucked the large plump pods from the slender plants and piled them at the end of each row. As each pile grew, patiently marking the passing of the day, it spilled over into the next, and that one into the next, swallowed by each other, until there was just one, large enough to redefine the borders of the maze. For several days, the corn dried in the air and sun, and when we returned to the field, it was the color of very light sandstone, the same as that which lined the canyon walls to the east. Each of us set out a large blanket and bundled the corn within. The withered husks twisted into graceful shapes by the wind, tossed against each other as we carried the bundles home. The sound of reeds in rushing water. Late blooming cactus grew along the edges of the narrow road that led from the field, and there were many low-lying vines that were thick with green and yellow gourds. Beyond the road, where the land moved away from us, small collections of tall yucca plants grew, and beyond them, closer to the river, several thin rose bushes had pushed up through the hard soil. A grove of cedar trees stood ahead of us near the winter kiva, and sweetgrass was all around. In spring, there were eagles here. Looking toward the west, a wide sandy plain curved into the distance, eventually disappearing from our sight. Ant hills of different sizes rose out of the otherwise flat ground, a constant movement of red and black on the stillness of the land. We often gathered plants of many kinds here, where the plain curved. It was a sacred place. We did not speak as we walked past the kiva. Drum sounds and voices echoed from within its walls and filled the space between us. We shifted the weight of our corn bundles. Again, the sound of reeds in rushing water. Red willows sprang from beneath the cottonwood trees that marked the center of the village and swayed in circular patterns as soft breezes from the north fluttered around them. We had danced there near the willows many times. The road thinned and wound down through a small orchard planted with peach and plum trees, branching off in several directions, then continuing on beyond us. We stayed to the north, walking toward our home and toward blue clouds. Lightning flashed above the mountains where kachinas lived and morning glories twined over the cliffs. Various shades of gray pushed through the blue, sending shadows into the sunlight and drawing the clouds closer to us. Thunder traveled down the canyons and into the village, where it turned to silence again. We prayed for rain. Setting our bundles on the cool ground in front of our house, we hoped for many colors of corn. Gently, we peeled away the papery husks, uncovering the rows of shiny seeds within, and sorted them according to color, each representing its own direction, its own color of cloud, its own color of butterfly. Some people in the village were named after these colors. We set aside some of each color to grind into fine powder and some to use for dances, and stacked what remained in long flat rows inside our house against the edges of the warm walls. What we ground, we mounded into clay pots of different shapes and sizes, some with black obsidian-like finishes, some earth-colored, and some painted with bear paw, parrot feather, or Avanu designs. A few we left in their husks and braided the leaves of 3 or 4 ears together. We hung them on the west wall near where we slept. Standing in the center of the room, we were surrounded by corn. This was a sacred place. Gathering the husks back into the blankets, we returned them to the field. We smoothed them out in a thin, even layer over the just harvested rows, along the base of the still standing stalks, to protect the soil from early frosts and late snows. Soon the stalks would fall into the thin layer of husks and disappear into winter, and the cycle of the corn would be complete. Clouds gathered from all directions. They swirled into and out of and over each other, and their shapes changed as they moved through the sky. Centers stretched into edges, edges pulled back into centers. A thin layer of yellow light weaved itself through the blue air above us, sending long, thin shadows onto the ground. Walking homeward again, we thought of the creation stories told to us by Taha, how our people came from the north, the place of emergence, and traveled down mountains and mesas and across flat, grass-covered prairies and through deep rivers and shallow streams and over watery marshes thick with cattails and around frozen clear lakes and past deep caves and under juniper trees heavy with berries and into snow-filled forests. They traveled in accordance with the positions and movements of the stars and listened closely to the wind currents that spun about them. This was the time of learning and of naming things, and the people gathered great knowledge from all that surrounded them. They named trees and mountains and hills and clouds. They named reflections in ponds and spirals in fine dirt. They named animals and plants and colors of clay. They named patterns of bird tracks near the river's edge. They named the different sizes of raindrops. They named the sounds of rushing leaves. They named the taste of tree sap and the texture of salt. They named the motions of sand swirling in streamside springs. They named the different shades of light around the moon. Waves of cool air rushed over us as the sun moved toward the horizon and sank down into dusk. The lightning and thunder grew brighter and louder, and the wind's shrill wolf songs floated above and passed into the coming darkness. Reaching the low, narrow doorway of our house, we were happy to be home, near Gia and Ta again. We went inside and waited for the rain. This was a sacred place, too. Thank you.